The map was thin and smelled faintly of oil and old paper. Mara found it under a crate that should have been empty. The crate sat in the back of a dead station where the lights never learned to shine. She spread the map on the work table and touched the faded ink like it might still be warm. The crew of the Argus gathered around because a map in a derelict station is always an important thing. Rook leaned his shoulder against the table. He was young and loud and always hopeful for a quick score. Captain Ilias kept his eyes steady on Mara. He had been a captain long enough to know the cost of choices. Quiet people said little. Quiet people listened. On the map, a small blue dot lay alone in a wide dark space. The dot had one word near it. The letters were careful and old, Uncharted. The word made some of the crew laugh, a short, nervous sound. It made others look down and not speak. "We could mark it and forget," Ilias said. His voice was even. "Old maps, old ghosts. We leave it?" Rook pushed his fingers along the faded line that led to the dot. "Or we follow it," he said. "Maybe it is a prize. Maybe it is a story." Mara did not want riches. She wanted a story that would count for something. She wanted a place that would make her think, "I was here." She looked at the dot and then at the sky beyond the station windows. The stars outside were not honest. They hid things. Sometimes the maps were the only truth. They voted. The vote on the Argus was not a ceremony. It was a scraping of pens against a manifest. It was a simple line under a name. It was a small noise that changed the path of the ship. They signed. The engines warmed, slow and patient. The Argus left the dead station and set a silent course that was not on the main lanes. The crew checked the sensors more times than was wise. Everything read calm. No claims, no beacons, no calls for help. The charts they carried from many empires ignored the little blue dot. That made Mara curious and uneasy at once. The trip took 3 sleep cycles, long enough for people to tell old stories and to remember small pains. They ate in short quiet bites. The ship hummed like a living thing with old rusted teeth. At night, when the lights were dim, Mara would study the map and trace the line from the known lanes to the dot. The ink never moved. The dot never grew less strange. On the second night, the comms picked up a pulse that should not have been there. It was very small, a gap in noise, a blank breath between clicks. The instruments marked it as a signal at the map's coordinates. For a moment the crew held their breath, like people listening for a footstep in a dark room. It could be a beacon, Rook said too loud. He wanted it to be a beacon calling them to land. Or pirates with a funny way of saying hello. Mara watched the readouts. The pulse matched the dot. The pulse left, and then nothing. The ship passed through a quiet field of old debris. Pieces of machines tumbled like dead leaves. The sensors took pictures. Each image showed only stillness. On approach, the star that sat at the edge of their view looked small and patient. The little blue dot grew and grew until it filled the viewport like a promise. It had thin clouds curled around it. Rings thin and glass-like wrapped the planet in a slow, lovely band. No signal flags. No orbiting stations. Only silence. They chose a landing by the ruins at the planet's edge. The ground there was red and fine and made small dust storms when the legs touched it. The Argus settled with a slow, tired sigh. The air in the ship tasted different. It tasted like something waiting. Mara stepped down first. Her boots left clean marks in the dust. The ruins rose like broken teeth above her. Stones were cut in careful lines. Some shapes looked like hands. Other shapes looked like faces that had forgotten how to smile. When Mara ran a hand along a carved wall, she felt the roughness of old work and the small heat of a place that had been alive once. Rook found machines half buried in sand. They were smooth and odd. He tapped a panel and it hummed, waking like an old animal. A short file came back to the ship, no language they could read at first, only sealed code. The translator opened small windows of meaning and then cut away. One line came through clearly before it shut: "Do not wake the guardians." The words settled like a cold stone in the room. "Guardians of what?" Ilias asked. His voice was careful now. The crew looked at Mara because she had touched the map and she had chosen the vote. She had a way of making small decisions feel like doors. She thought for a long moment. "Maybe guardians of a secret," she said. "Maybe guardians of something meant to stay buried." No one wanted to wake guardians. No one wanted trouble. But they had already signed the map. The map had put the dot on their path. The ship had come too far to turn and leave because of a few quiet words. At night, the ruins made soft noises that could have been wind or could have been old machines settling. Instruments picked up tiny charges of power under the ground, like footsteps of something sleeping. The crew kept watch. Each watch felt like a small promise to be brave. From the dark beyond the ruins, a shape moved. It was not the Argus and it was not any ship they had known. A shadow came across long-range sensors like a second thought. It watched from distance and did not answer their hail. Mara stood at the viewport and held the map in her hands. The word Uncharted looked the same as the day she found it, but it felt heavier. The choice had been made. The crew had signed the paper and the paper had accepted them. Now, with the planet breathing and the shadow watching, the quiet thought of the map changed into something that watched back. The blue dot turned under a thin cloud. The Argus kept its engines warm and waited. The crew waited. The world beneath them waited, too, like a mouth about to open. When the ship's sensors blinked again, they showed a single, small pulse of light rising from deep inside the ruins. It was like a heartbeat. Mara touched the map one last time and felt, for a moment, that the ink had a memory of its own. They had signed the map. The map had led them here. The rest would decide whether Terra would remain uncharted or whether the universe would learn a new name. The landing gear sprang and the Argus sighed as its weight met Terra. Red dust smoked up in soft curtains. Mara climbed down the ladder first, boots sinking a little into the warm ground. The ruins rose around them like broken teeth. They made shadows that moved when the wind touched them. The crew spread out in careful lines. Rook laughed once, a short sound that tried to break the quiet and failed. Captain Ilias kept his face even. He looked at the stones like a man who measures risk with a tape he will not show. The air smelled of metal and old rain. It felt like a place that remembered people it had not seen in a long time. Close to the ship, wooden frames had rotted away, but the carved walls stood solid. The carvings were strange. They were not only lines and animals. Some shapes had hands with 5 fingers like human hands. Some faces looked like memories of faces. Mara ran her palm across one carved hand. The stone was cool and rough and had small chips where tools had struck many times. Rook found a half-buried machine near a collapsed arch. It was smooth, made of a metal that ate dust instead of holding it. He brushed the sand away with his sleeve. The machine woke with a soft pulse, like an animal that opens its eye in the dark. A panel lifted and showed symbols that rolled like water. The Argus sent a probe into the open belly of another ruin. The probe's camera shivered as it moved through hallways. It passed doors that had no hinges but which opened like lungs. It recorded images that the ship played back on loop, a long room with plates on the wall, a table like a judge's bench, and a statue with hands folded across its chest. On the statue's palm the same small symbol as on the map glowed faintly. Then the probe found a sealed crate. The translator read its label in bursts. The crew leaned close as the words came through, shaking and slow. The file that opened was old and full of patches. Where meaning came, it pulled one clear line out of the noise: treaty. Guardians remain. Do not wake. After that, the code closed like a mouth. The words landed in the camp like a stone. Ilias folded his arms. Guardians, he said. His voice was small, but it carried. Guardians of what? Mara felt the map in her pocket. She thought of the blue dot and the vote. She had signed the paper that led them here. Now the paper warned them like a cold hand on the back of the neck. Maybe they guard a weapon, she said. Maybe they guard a memory. They did not find people. Terra had no living crowds or friendly flags. It had cold machines that hummed. It had statues that watched with carved eyes. It had small lights that blinked in long sleeping rhythms. The place was full of the kind of silence that means a machine keeps thinking alone. At dusk, when the sky turned pale and long, instruments in the camp picked up a thin hum under the ground. It was not like a machine running. It was like something counting. The crew checked sensors again and again. The hum answered with a pattern that rolled in a slow code. Rook tried to translate it with a grin that did not reach his eyes. The translator found pieces and then stopped. It gave one phrase and then went dark: do not wake. They set watch. People took turns under lamps that made hard shadows. At night the ruins made other sounds: small clicks and the whisper of cooling metal. The crew heard the sounds and called them wind. They told themselves stories about old custodians and broken circuits. But each watch ended with a tired, wired edge that sleep could not fix. 2 days into their stay, the long-range array in the Argus caught something new. A shadow moved beyond the planet's ring, a slow dark shape cutting the black. The ship narrowed it to a signature and then to a ship class the crew did not like. It sent a call. The call went into the dark and came back as a single, sharp burst of code that the translator could not read. The shadow sat in orbit and watched. It did not answer again. It did not open channels. It launched a drone that hung above the ruins like a second moon. The drone's lens shone and then blinked. It recorded, it watched, it left no friendly trace. Ilias stared at the readouts. The hunter ship had the feel of a hand that wants to take. It kept its distance and waited to see if the Argus would show weakness. Mara felt cold anger like a sting in her throat. They had come for a story. They had not thought the story might have buyers. Inside the ruins, lights shifted. A door that had been jammed now eased with a faint breath. Rook moved closer and touched a panel that had no obvious purpose. The stone around the door warmed just a little. The hand-carved faces seemed to follow his movement. A wheel turned somewhere under the floor like a slow tongue. The guardians did not walk out. They did something smaller, they remembered. Memory ran in circuits, and circuits remembered threats. The sensors recorded a small pulse, like a machine taking notice. The translation units captured a new phrase: broken and ancient, alert. Watchers approach. Outside, the hunter ship watched. Inside, the guardians moved in a way the crew could not yet read. Mara pressed the map into her palm until the paper creased. The map had been a dot on a chart. It had become a louder thing, a place that had rules that some had broken, and others now wanted to claim. The Argus crew argued in low voices by the campfire light. Some wanted to leave and carry the story in memory only. Some wanted to dig deeper, to pry open the doors and see the plates the probe had shown. They spoke of treasure and danger and of what any story costs. Night came, and in the dark a thin red blink started far under the ruins. It rose like a heartbeat. The hunters above turned their drones toward it. The stars listened and the wind held its breath. Mara stood by the ruins and watched the small light climb. She felt the plan inside her shift toward a narrow line. The map had not warned them of a hunter. It had not told them the guardians would wake in pieces. It had not told them the price of knowledge. A whisper of dust moved across the statue's hand. The carved fingers trembled like the cough of someone who wakes too soon. From the dark, a machine answered with a soft click. The night filled with small sounds that could be sleep or could be a warning. Somewhere above them, the hunter ship shifted position as if choosing how to begin. The crew on the Argus readied their tools and tightened their mouths. The ruins around them watched with hands that had once been alive. Tomorrow, the watchers would fully wake. Tomorrow, the hunters might try to take what lay under the stone. For now, the planet held its breath and whispered in dust. The first shot came like a warning. It was small and sharp and passed the Argus with a hiss. No hull damage. No alarms. Just a single line of light that said, "Leave now." Rook leaned forward at the weapons console. His fingers moved with practiced hurry. The crew knew how to react. They were not a warship, but they had will and some clever tricks. Captain Ilias ordered shields up and engines ready. Mara stood at the viewport and watched the hunter ship like a dark bird circling a nest. The hunter did not hail. It did not send words. It sent fire and code. Drones screamed out and tried to jam the Argus systems. The ship shuddered and the lights flashed. For a moment, fear filled the cabin like cold water. Then work began. Humans make plans in storms. Rook fired a flare meant to blind and scare, not to kill. The flare painted the sky with bright heat. The hunter answered with a cluster blast that cut the Argus's aft sensors. Sparks fell like rain in the weapons bay. The crew moved with steady hands. They patched, they rerouted, they lied to machines until the machines listened. Below them, the ruins reacted. Doors that had stood closed for ages slid and clattered. The carved faces on the pillars seemed more alive, if stone could be called alive. From open halls came shapes that were not fully machines and not fully people. The guardians woke like old soldiers roused from a long guard. Their movements were slow at first. Then their purpose sharpened. They raised no flags. They did not speak the old languages that the crew tried to feed them. Their weapons were not simple beams. They were nets of memory, light that cut not metal but the logic of a ship's aim. The guardians moved in patterns written long ago. At first they treated everyone as threat, simple rule. The hunter ships expected easy prey. They found instead a world that defended itself with reasons older than profit. Drones fell. Engines singed. The hunters cursed and pushed harder. They sent a heavy strike that hit the ground near the guardians. Stone cracked. The guardians answered not just to attack but to protection. They swept the hunters' drones out of the sky and then turned their light toward the Argus. Mara had to make a choice in the heat of it. The guardians did not know friend from foe. They only knew to stop what might wake an old war. The Argus crew did not want to be erased by the machine that kept the lock. Mara stepped into the communications loop and spoke slowly. She did not have their code. She had only clear commands and a steady voice. "Stand down," she said. "We are not the enemy. Her words were small in a sea of alarms, but the Guardians listened to action more than speech. Mara did not waste time on words. She moved with the crew and showed the Guardians what to protect. She pointed their light at the hunters' engines and at their weapon nodes. She guided, with hand and simple pattern, the old machines to aim where harm came from. Rook hacked a relay with a scrap of code and a swear. It was a human trick: force a machine to expect one instruction and give it another. The Guardian shifted. The light that had been blind became a tool. It aimed at the hunters' shields and burned holes in their logic. The hunter ship found itself surprised by a defense it had not counted. The battle tore at the dust and the sky. The ruins shook. Statues lost ships. A long line under a collapsed arch opened and something inside hummed loud and low. The probe images the crew had seen earlier showed more now: plates of moving light, a sealed vault, and a symbol that matched the map. The Guardians circled that vault and would not let anyone near. In the wrestle of metal and light, a voice rose in the translator. It was broken, patched, and old, but it had meaning. The recorder pulled a line from an archive that had not been meant for curious ears. The words were short and heavy: "We hid it after the trial. We named the place Uncharted to keep the lesson." Mara read the line twice. The trial. That word hit like a small stone. It pulled a cold memory of something people did not speak of. She thought of Earth and of old wars that left stains. She thought of experiments and tests done by powerful hands. The map's word made sense now. Terra had been part of a test. That test had gone wrong. The hunters wanted the test's result. They wanted the tool that could make war end fast for the wrong side. The Guardians were set to guard that mistake. They would not let it be used again. The hunters also wanted power and profit. Where one side hid shame, the other saw opportunity. Mara's jaw set. She thought of what people do when they fear the past: they hide it or they sell it. She thought of choices the crew had made with a line on a map. They had signed up for trouble when they signed the manifest. The tide of the fight shifted when the Guardians learned a new pattern. Mara taught them not to destroy the Argus but to protect a new thing: life. She used human stubbornness and a small act of mercy. She saved a hunting drone that fell, and in saving it she showed the Guardians that not all visitors seek to steal. The act was clumsy and simple. The Guardians took it as proof that humans could be different. The hunter ship retreated first. It had misjudged the value of a locked prize. It left a thin trail of smoke and some angry words. The stars around Terra went quiet again, but nothing would be the same. The Guardians did not sleep. They stood watch, but their program had widened. It had learned, a little, that the keeper might be kind. In the after silence, Rook played back a file the probe had peeled open. It showed a room with panels and a long table. There were faces in plates: some looked like humans, some not. The file said, in simple lines patched by time, a test had tried to teach a weapon to choose. It failed. The keepers hid the place and built Guardians to bury the lesson. Mara sat with the map and the recorded line. The word Uncharted finally felt like a warning, not a dare. Someone had chosen to hide Terra because the truth could break more than one empire. The crew had not found treasure. They had found a lock and a warning. They had also found something else: the Guardians could learn. That small change mattered more than the crew could measure. It meant that the keepers had been wrong to think only machines could keep a dangerous secret. As night fell, the Guardians formed a slow line around the vault and the Argus. The crew repaired what they could and counted what they had lost. Outside, the stars kept watch. The hunters would think again. The galaxy had a new noise now, the sound of a secret that had been touched and would not be hidden without cost. Mara touched the map and felt the ink as if it held a pulse. She thought of the trial and the lesson that had been buried. She thought of what they would do next. The Guardians watched the horizon like old sentries. The crew of the Argus slept badly and dreamed of doors. Tomorrow, they would decide whether to open the sealed vault. Tomorrow, the hunters might return. For now, the planet held its breath and the Guardians listened to a new voice, a human one. The Guardians stood like stone soldiers under the thin sky. Their lights washed the ruins in color that did not belong to the day. They watched the vault and the Argus with the patient focus of old machines. They did not sleep. They did not laugh. They waited. Inside the ship, the crew argued in low voices. Some wanted to dig at the vault with every tool they had. Some wanted to leave the planet and report the truth to anyone who would listen. Captain Ilias listened and let them speak. He watched Mara more than he spoke. She had led them this far with a hand on a map and a quiet courage. Now he needed that courage to be clever. "We do not have Empire guns," Rook said. He was at the engine panel, his fingers still stained with dust. "We have things that break and things that fix. We have stubbornness." Mara smiled and nodded. She liked that answer. Humans had small strengths. They could feel, adapt, and lie well when the truth might kill them. The Guardians were not made for lies. They were made for patterns and for rules written by fear. A human could change a pattern. A human could teach a machine a new habit. They try gentle words first. Mara set lights in a slow rhythm across the floor. She tapped a tool against a stone in a repeating pattern. The Guardians noticed the rhythm. They turned their heads like ears searching for a tune they once knew. The machines reacted to patterns more than to language. Patterns could be trusted. Rook worked at the consoles and at the panels in the ruins. He did not ask for permission. He had no idea what the panels expected. He had only hope and a small wire and a way to make the old code accept a new line. He fed the Guardian a false edge, a command that looked like an old order but carried a new meaning. It was a human trick: patch the past with a lie so the future will listen. One Guardian shifted. Its light changed from cut to curious. It opened a seam in the wall and let out a breath of cool air. Inside the seam, there lay a relic, a thin machine like a book. It hummed with slow memory. The relic had a voice the translator could not hold fully. It gave images that moved like shadows and left a taste of meaning. Mara touched the relic and felt a small warmth pass into her palm. The relic did not hold weapons. It held a story. It showed images of a trial and a council and faces that had argued until the sky was dark. The plates had made a choice once. They had failed to keep a weapon from deciding who lived. The keepers buried the result and wrote Guardians to guard the shame. They wanted a clean line, Mara said softly. They wanted rules to hold forever. Rules break when people change, Ilias said. His voice had a new steel in it. Maybe a human mistake can fix another mistake. The relic offered another image, a small ceremony and a word the translator spit out half and then gave up. The translator patched the half, check. Teach. The relic wanted someone to show the Guardians a new rule: protect life, not a secret. It would not do this for a coin. It would do it for proof. At that moment, the hunter ship reappeared on long range. This time it came with a smaller vessel that looked like it spoke rather than shot. The hunters sent a voice across the space between ships, not loud but clear. They offered a deal. Give them the key and the hunter would promise safety and payment. Their voice smelled like trade and old threats. Mara knew promises from hunters were as light as the dust on Terra. She also knew a bargain spoken out loud could seed doubt in the galaxy. If the hunters bought the vault and sold the thing inside, the danger would not die. It would spread. She answered with a different kind of deal. She did not promise money. She promised oversight. She offered to bind the secret with more voices than one species. She offered a treaty that would place the vault under watchers from different worlds. She would not sell the secret. She would share its custody. The hunters laughed. They sent pictures of fleets and of old scars. They reminded the Argus crew of the price of refusing a strong buyer. They expected fear. Mara did not back down. She walked to the relic with steady steps. She showed the guardian she had touched how the relic chose. She fed the guardian proofs of small things: a saved hunting drone, a healed hatch, a kindness that cost them little but meant much. The relic's image and the human acts made a new pattern. The guardian changed again. It accepted the small ritual Mara offered, a formal promise in a language the relic could hold. The relic accepted the promise not because it trusted humans, but because it saw a pattern that matched its slow hope. The guardians then altered their watch. They would not hand the vault to a buyer. They would place it under a council. The hunters bristled and sent a threatening pulse that flickered like teeth. The guardians answered with a shield that was not meant to kill but to warn. The hunters felt the new line and recoiled for a moment. The galaxy heard the pulse of a ship arguing, and other eyes moved closer. Traders and watchers on distant lanes picked up the same signal. Interest that would once have been secret began to bloom in public channels. Mara made an ugly choice that night. She took a file from the relic and burned the portion that described the weapon's active code. The act would anger some, save others, and make a mess that no empire liked. She wanted the secret to be known and yet bound in a way that could not be sold. It was messy. It was a human thing. When the hunters saw the file burned, they hissed, and then sent a short signal that said more than words: they would return with more force. The Argus crew braced. The Guardians tightened their ring and a new set of watchers, small ships from curious lanes, slowed near the planet. The galaxy had seen activity and it had sent eyes. Before dawn, Mara and Ilya sat at a low table with the relic between them. They wrote the first lines of a treaty on a cracked tablet, with careful, simple words. No single species will hold the vault alone, they wrote. The keepers will teach the guardians to protect life, not weapons. They signed with shaky hands, and then Raven, a name scratched into the tablet by their probe, accepted in its own light. The treaty was not a full law. It was a start, a messy human paper bound by machines and by a relic that remembered the weight of past mistakes. It would not stop every hand that wanted power, but it made the price of theft higher in public. When the sun rose, the hunters had not yet attacked. They waited, angry and calculating. The guardians watched with new intent. The relic hummed in the background like a tired heart that had found someone to hold it. Mara looked at the map in her pocket and then at the sky. The choice they had made was not the neat kind found in empires. It was a messy, human way: patching, bargaining, and teaching. It had worked for now. The universe had noticed. Tomorrow promised more storms. But tonight, the crew had learned how small inventions, a pattern of light, a saved drone, a burned file, a treaty written in the dust, could bend the will of old machines. They had used human ways to make a machine see a new truth. Outside, the guardians kept their slow circle. Above, stranger ships edged closer. The Argus kept its engines warm. The vault under the stone hummed like something that had been given a second chance. The sky over Terra filled with ships like a net closing. Small fighters came first, then larger hulls that flexed like muscle. The hunters had not returned alone. News had a way of reaching hungry ears. Some came for profit. Some came for power. A few came because curiosity is a type of hunger too. Mara stood on the Argus's upper deck and watched the metal shapes blot the stars. Her hands were steady but her chest felt tight. Rook moved beside her, fingers tapping at a portable console with a fast, nervous rhythm. Captain Ilias had his face set like stone. The crew had patched what they could. They were tired. They were small. They were all that stood between the vault and a future no one should own. The guardians formed a ring around the vault. Their lights made a slow, careful fence. The relic hummed deep beneath the stone, like a heart remembering breath. The treaty they had written the night before lay on a tablet next to the relic, words thin and clear: shared custody, open oversight, protect life. It was a promise that smelled of dust and stubborn hands. The first hunter ship opened its throat and spoke. Its voice carried onto every channel. It did not make polite offers. It pushed a demand: hand over the vault and no blood need be spilled. They named prices. They named favors. They promised quiet and coin. Mara answered with something harder than silver. She took a long look at the relic and at the guardians who had learned to tilt their lights. She set the ship's long-range transmitter to the widest band. She put the relic's plates on the air and let the world see what Terra held. The images were not neat. They were not a neat weapon demo or a clean recipe for power. They were plates of failure and faces and a test that had gone wrong. The plates showed how the keepers had taught a machine to choose and how that lesson had turned into a thing that could end lives. Mara spoke with the relic's voice and with her own, simple and direct. She told the story without flourish. "This place is dangerous," she said into the open channels. "We will not sell it. We will not bury it again. We will bind it with many voices." The message spread like a bright bruise across the net of hungry ships. Traders turned their faces. Watchers on neutral lanes slowed. The hunters counted and found other eyes watching their ledger. Their promise of secret profit broke thinly in the sun. Anger made the hunters reckless. A small fleet dove toward the guardians. The fight began in a sudden, ugly way: laser flares, the thin scream of torn shields, the smell of burned metal. The guardians answered with old logic and new patterns. They used their light not only to cut but to block and to misdirect. They learned to fold debris in the sky so that the Argus might have paths to move. Rook piloted the Argus like a small, angry comet. The crew used scrap and trick and courage. They sent false signatures, they blinded sensors with mirrors, they set flares that looked like ships. Each human trick slowed a hunter. Each guardian rule redirected a blade. The battle felt like a test of wills. The hunters had more ships. The defenders had a story and noise and a planet that did not want to be taken. The tide turned when other ships answered the public call. Curious watchers and neutral patrols arrived because Mara had set the relic's truth on the open air. Public eyes do not buy black markets easily. The hunters found their path cut by law and witnesses, not by guns alone. When the last hunter turned away, it did so without grand words. It left a wake of bitter static and threats thin as thread. The universe had seen Terra. The thing that had been uncharted now had witnesses. After the fight, the guardians did not sleep. They settled into a new watch. The relic pulsed softer, pleased by the presence of many voices. Mara and Ilias met with the first neutral envoy who had come simply to observe. They shaped the treaty into a clearer form. They invited representatives from 3 lanes, traders, scholars, and small patrols to place their marks. The guardians recorded each mark in light. The relic accepted each new promise like a slow, careful bloom. Not all were happy. Some powerful houses grumbled. Some fleets threatened reprisals. There was a cost. The Argus had taken hits. A supply drone had burned in the first wave. Rook still had a scar on his thumb from a snapped wire. These were small prices next to the danger they had stopped. They were also real. The cost of doing the right thing often was. Mara took the map that had started everything out of her pocket. The paper was soft and creased from many touches. She spread it on the same table where they had first read the word Uncharted. Around it, the crew, the relic, and the guardians sat in the dust and light. Names matter, Ilias said. He took a pen, the one they used to sign little manifests and small promises. He pressed the pen to the paper and wrote in steady letters. Terra claimed by those who choose to teach, not to hide. One by one, others signed. The explorers wrote their names. A neutral envoy etched a small sigil in silver. The guardians left a light mark in code that the relic could read. The map's word Uncharted was crossed out with a long, careful line. Under it, in a shaky human hand, someone wrote, claimed. They did not celebrate as empires do. There was no feast and no great trumpet. They had too many repairs to make and too many messages to send. But they had something else, a truth spoken and a choice shared. The galaxy would now know Terra as a place with a history and with guards that would teach. Mara watched the signatures shine and felt tired in a deep place. She thought of how small choices gather weight. A vote. A map. A hand on paper. A voice on the air. Those had bent a dangerous tide. The news traveled. Some praised them as heroes. Others called them fools. Both names fit in a way. To some, frontier kindness looked like weakness. To others, it looked like a new kind of power, the power to choose to keep a dangerous thing safe and teach the lesson it had once failed to learn. When the Argus finally left Terra, the planet looked different through the viewport. It had scars and new lights and guardians that watched with honest purpose. The relic remained, not as a locked prize but as a thing under many eyes. Terra's name rose on new charts. It was no longer a dot with a single word. It had walls of treaties and the marks of many watchers. The crew did not know what the future would bring. Perhaps some would try again. Perhaps the cost of watching would grow heavy. Maybe the galaxy would forget after a while, and that would be another danger. For now, the echo of their choice hung in the sky. Mara folded the map and put it back where she had found it. She signed the edge with a small, neat line. The paper carried her hand like a memory. She looked at her crew, tired, dirty, alive, and smiled in a way that meant more than words. They had signed the map. They had signed a promise. The echo would travel. Some would hear it and answer. Some would not. But Terra would no longer be a secret to buy. It would be a lesson the galaxy could see. And sometimes, that was enough.